All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving deep into one of history's most incredible stories, the rise, the glory, and the dramatic fall of ancient Egypt's most powerful era, the New Kingdom.
So let's kick things off with a big question. How does a nation that's been conquered, that's literally under the thumb of foreign kings,
Somehow turn the tables and become the ancient world's greatest superpower for the next 500 years? That's the incredible journey we're going to unpack right now. Okay, so our story kicks off around 1650 BCE. Egypt is, well, it's a mess. It's in what's called the Second Intermediate Period, which basically means it's totally fractured. You've got these foreign kings from Asia, the Hyksos, ruling the north. But way down south in the city of Thebes, something is stirring. A spark of rebellion is about to catch fire. And this is where it all begins. Just look at this. The mummy of the Theban king, Sekenenre, tells a really violent story. Those awful wounds on his skull, they're pretty clear evidence he died right there on the battlefield, probably face to face with the Hyksos. His death wasn't just an end. It became a rallying cry. So his son, Kamos, he picks up the torch. And that quote you see, that wasn't just talk. It was a mission statement for this new, fired-up Egyptian spirit. It was a vow to kick out the invaders and take back their land. But, it was actually Kamos's brother Amos who would finish the job, and he was a brilliant strategist. He didn't just charge in. He had this incredible multi-step plan. He systematically took apart the Hyksos power structure one piece at a time until he finally laid siege to their capital and won. And with that victory, the Hyksos were gone for good. Amos founded the 18th dynasty, and boom, the new kingdom was born. Okay, so now Egypt is finally free. But they're not just going to sit back and relax. They're ambitious. After being ruled by foreigners, they were absolutely determined to make sure that never, ever happened again. And their strategy? It was pretty straightforward. The best defense is a good offense. It was time to build an empire. And this was a complete reboot for the entire country. Their whole foreign policy flipped from defense to outright conquest. The god of their city, Amun, got a promotion, basically, to Amun-Ra, the king of all gods, which kind of justified their whole imperial project. Thebes became this spectacular capital. And to keep their legacy safe, the pharaohs started a new tradition, a top-secret royal cemetery we now call the Valley of the Kings. Just think about it. Egyptian armies were marching all the way to the Euphrates River for the very first time. They were a world power now. Now, what's really fascinating about this period is that you get these two totally different approaches to being a great ruler, back to back. On one hand, you have Queen Hatshepsut, one of the most powerful women in history. Her focus was on peace, trade, and building incredible monuments. You could call it soft power. And then, right after her, you get the ultimate hard power pharaoh, her successor, Thutmose III. This guy was known as the Napoleon of Egypt. He led something like 16 military campaigns, won the famous Battle of Megiddo, and pushed the empire to its absolute largest extent. Two very different paths to greatness. All right, so fast forward a bit. Under King Amenhotep III, the empire is at its absolute peak. I'm talking staggering wealth, international prestige. They were the undisputed superpower. But right at this high point, the biggest challenge they would face wasn't going to come from an enemy army. It was going to come from inside the royal palace itself. So Amenhotep III's son takes the throne, and he just breaks everything. He changes his name to Akhenaten. He announces that all the old gods of Egypt are fake, and there's only one true god, the Aten, which is the physical disk of the sun. He ditches the capital city of Thebes, the center of the old religion, and builds a brand new city out in the desert called Amarna. Can you imagine the chaos? This religious revolution, plus the fact that he was totally ignoring foreign policy, sent the whole empire into a tailspin. And who comes next? Well, you know him, the world-famous boy king Tutankhamun. We all think of his golden mask and treasures, right? But his real, most important legacy was political. He was the one who had to clean up the mess. He abandoned Akhenaten's new city, moved everyone back to Thebes, and officially brought back all the old gods. He was the great restorer. But, after that much chaos, it really took a tough military guy to put the final nail in the coffin of that whole experiment. A general named Horemheb, who wasn't even royal, seized the throne. He issued this thing called the Edict of Horemheb, which was basically a huge set of reforms designed to crush corruption and, get this, systematically erase every trace of Akhenaten's revolution from history. Talk about a hard reset.
So, with stability back on the table and the old gods restored, Egypt was ready for one last spectacular blaze of glory. Welcome to the Ramesside period, an age of colossal building and a new line of powerful warrior pharaohs.
And this entire era was just completely dominated by one larger-than-life pharaoh, Ramses II, or as we know him, Ramses the Great. The man ruled for an astounding 66 years. Just think about that. He outlived most of his own kids and basically defined an entire century in his own image.
And his legacy is just mind-blowing. The guy was a master builder, putting up temples like Abu Simbel on a scale that nobody had ever even dreamed of. He was a fearsome warrior, famously going head-to-head with the other big superpower, the Hittite Empire. And then he turns around and becomes a master diplomat, signing the world's first ever recorded peace treaty with those very same Hittites. Just an incredible figure.
But even at this absolute peak of power, you can start to see storm clouds gathering on the horizon. During the reign of his son, Merneptah, we start seeing these inscriptions that talk about a new threat, this mysterious coalition of invaders coming from across the Mediterranean, a group we call the Sea Peoples. And this, right here, was the beginning of the end.
And that brings us to the final, really dramatic chapter of the New Kingdom. The game has changed. Egypt isn't expanding anymore. It's just trying to survive, fighting for its very existence against these new waves of enemies. The last great warrior pharaoh of this era was Ramses III. He took on the Sea Peoples in these huge land and sea battles, and incredibly, he won. He saved Egypt from the complete collapse that so many other great civilizations around them were suffering. But it was a Pyrrhic victory. It came at a huge cost, completely draining the treasury and shattering the military.
And the consequences of those wars were just massive. Yes, Egypt, the nation, was saved. But Egypt, the empire, it was over. The bank was empty, the army was exhausted, and they simply couldn't afford to hold on to their vast territories abroad anymore. The empire just dissolved. What came next was just a long, painful unraveling. Ramesses III himself was actually murdered in a palace conspiracy. The economy went into a nosedive with inflation and strikes. Things got so bad that organized gangs started robbing the royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings. And finally, with the death of Ramesses XI, the New Kingdom officially came to a close. So what happened after the New Kingdom fell? Well, it ushered in a completely new reality for Egypt. The period that followed is called the Third Intermediate Period, and it was a time of political fragmentation. You had different dynasties ruling different parts of the country at the same time. All this weakness, of course, eventually made Egypt a prime target, and in the late period that followed, it was hit by invasion after invasion, even being conquered by the massive Persian Empire. So when you look at the whole story, from that incredible war of liberation to the dizzying heights of empire and then that final slow decay, the story of Egypt's New Kingdom is a powerful lesson. It shows that even the greatest empires can be brought to their knees, not just by invading armies, but by crises from within, by economic collapse, and by a loss of faith in the very ideas that made them great in the first place.